I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, and my lips still trembling from the words he whispered into them. Heather, I love you. Not my husband, my therapist. The man who was supposed to help me glue myself back together had just helped me come undone. And the worst part? I let him. I let him touch a place my husband had not reached in years, my heart. I told myself it was not betrayal. Not really. But as I stared into the rearview mirror, mascara running, breath shaky, I saw the truth. I had crossed the line between healing and destruction. And the part of me that should have screamed, run, whispered, stay. Now I had to choose. Go home to the man I vowed to love, or keep sinking into the arms of the one who finally saw me. Before I continue, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to this channel. You are the reason I find the strength to share these stories. And to all new and returning viewers who are yet to subscribe, I truly appreciate you for being here. Please hit that subscribe button. It fuels this channel and gives me the energy to keep telling the kind of stories that matter. Do not forget to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. My name is Heather. I live in Newark, Delaware. I am 42 years old, and until a few months ago, I was dying inside with a smile on my face. Vernon, my husband of 15 years, was a good man. On paper, he worked hard, paid the bills, never raised his voice. But he also had the emotional range of drywall. For years, I begged him to see me, feel me, talk to me. His reply was always the same. You are just too sensitive, Heather. After I miscarried our second child, something in me snapped. I did not want to talk to friends. I stopped painting. I stopped laughing. I felt like a walking shadow, barely functioning. So Vernon, in one of his rare attempts to fix something emotional, said I should try therapy. That is how I met Seth. He had kind eyes, salt and pepper hair, and a voice like rain on a window. From the first session, I felt safe, seen. He did not just listen, he remembered. He looked at me like I mattered. And I, like a starving woman at a feast, started to lean in more than I should have. It was subtle at first. An extra minute at the end of a session. A compliment about my dress. But over time, I started dressing for him, thinking about him between sessions, writing in my journal things I would never say aloud. One rainy Tuesday, I broke. I was crying about Vernon again. Seth moved from his chair to sit beside me on the couch. Heather, he said softly, you deserve to be loved the way you give love. His hand found mine. I did not pull away. Then his thumb grazed my cheek, and our faces were too close, too warm, too dangerous. I could have stopped it. I should have stopped it. But when his lips brushed mine, my heart betrayed me. In that moment, I felt more than I had in years. Not desire, not lust, but the aching kind of intimacy that feels like oxygen after drowning. I left the office shaking, walked to my car like I was outside my body. And as I sat there, the guilt started crawling in like fog. I had a husband waiting for me at home, but I was not sure I wanted to go back. Do I tell my husband? Do I run from this mistake before it becomes something deeper? Or have I already fallen too far? I did not sleep that night. I laid beside Vernon, his breathing steady and unaware, while my thoughts screamed through the silence. He reached for my hand once in his sleep. I flinched, not because I hated him, but because I could not remember the last time I wanted his touch. That morning, I stared at myself in the mirror and whispered, "You are not that woman. You do not do things like this." But I was, and I had, and I did it again. Not right away, no. Seth and I pretended nothing had happened the next session. His hands stayed folded. His voice stayed professional. But the air between us was charged. Every glance lingered. Every silence throbbed. 2 weeks later, I told him I felt confused, that I had never felt so understood, that my heart was breaking in places my husband could not even see. Seth said, "You are not broken. You were just ignored for too long." I cried. He pulled me into a hug. And then we crossed the line again, not with bodies, but with hearts. He said he loved me, and I did not doubt it. Not in that moment. We started seeing each other outside our sessions. A coffee shop in Dover. A bookstore in Middletown. Always discreet. Always short. But always enough to keep me from breathing deeply when I got home. Vernon began noticing. "You have been different lately," he said one night over dinner. "More distant. Quieter. Is everything all right?" I nodded.
Leet.
Smiled. Then I excused myself and went to the bathroom to cry. It was around that time that Tracy, my best friend since high school, cornered me. We were having lunch at Iron Hill Brewery when she leaned in and asked, "Heather, who is he?" I froze. "Do not play dumb," she continued. "You think I do not recognize the look in your eyes? You are falling. And it is not for Vernon." I broke. I told her everything. The sessions. The kisses. The confessions. She looked at me like I had set fire to my own home. "That man is your therapist. Do you know how wrong that is?" I knew. Of course I knew. But I could not let go of how he made me feel, like I was light in someone's darkness, instead of always being the shadow in Vernon's world. He said I am his first real connection in years, I whispered. Tracy shook her head. "Heather, that is not love. That is emotional manipulation." I wanted to hate her for saying it, but part of me wondered, was she right? Then one evening, Vernon found something. A handwritten note tucked into one of my art journals. I had not realized I had left it there. I walked into the kitchen and found him standing still, holding it. His voice was low. "Who is Seth?" My mouth went dry. In that moment, I felt everything crumble. I had been so careful, so quiet, but my lies had a way of surfacing. How do you look someone in the eye after they have just found the one piece of evidence that confirms their worst fear? What happens when love, guilt, and betrayal finally crash into each other? Vernon held the note like it was on fire. His hands did not shake. His voice did not rise. But his eyes, those were not the eyes of a man angry. They were the eyes of a man shattered. I had never seen him cry before. Not at his father's funeral. Not when I lost our baby. But now, standing in our kitchen, under the soft yellow light above the sink, tears slid down his cheeks. And I could not cry with him. He looked at me like he was searching for someone he used to know. Like he was begging me to tell him this was not what it looked like. But I said nothing, because it was exactly what it looked like. The note was simple, something Seth had scribbled and folded into my hand after a bookstore meeting. It read, "You make me feel human again. Yours always, Seth." Vernon asked one question. "How long?" I told him the truth. Not because I wanted to, but because I owed him at least that much. His shoulders dropped. He nodded. And then he walked out. No suitcase. No yelling. Just the front door opening and closing behind him. I collapsed to the floor, and for the first time in this entire twisted story, I felt hollow. The affair, if you could call it that, came to a crashing halt within days. Tracy told me I needed to report Seth. I did. It felt like betrayal all over again. But this time, I was turning in the man I thought I loved. Seth lost his license. His office shut down. And just like that, he disappeared from Delaware. No apology. No goodbye. Just gone. I started therapy again, real therapy, with a woman named Diane. She never touched my hand. She never made me feel like I was magical. But she made me feel responsible. She helped me face the wreckage I caused. The parts of me that were broken before Seth ever walked into my life. Vernon never moved back in. We signed the divorce papers quietly.
He never yelled.
Never asked me why. I think he already knew. He once said, before he walked away for good, "You were hurting, Heather."
I just did not see how deep.
But he saw it, and he used it. Those words stayed with me, because no matter how much I wanted to believe it was love, deep down I knew it was not. It was need. And need is not love. Need is a void. I chased something forbidden because I wanted to feel alive. But in the end, all I felt was alone. Healing does not come from validation. It does not come from stolen moments or whispered promises from someone who is not yours. It comes from doing the slow, painful work of facing yourself without a rescuer. I wanted to feel worth loving, but all I proved was how far I was willing to go to escape the emptiness inside me. Now I am rebuilding, not for love, but for peace. Because peace never asks you to lie. It never asks you to betray. And it never comes from crossing lines that were drawn to protect you. Thank you for staying with me through this story. What are your thoughts? Was it love? Or was it manipulation? Have you ever mistaken attention for healing? Let me know in the comments below. I read every one of them. And please, if this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. Until next time, stay honest with yourself and stay safe.